Hello, I'm Mr. Pibbles, but you can call me Peter, and welcome to our Challenge Park series here in Planet Coaster 2. Now, in our last episode, we got a little bit done. We finished off everything regarding this little ride here, and the little boulevard that connects the front of the park to our karting raceway, which is fun. As well as this, we made a start on the souvenir building here, and I have gone ahead and finished it in the background so we can get on and do some fun stuff in this episode. So, yeah, without further ado, with this little front bit out here, but without further ado, let's get into the time-lapse. Yes, hello and welcome to the time-lapse. I will be your host, and we've got some interesting stuff lined up for today's episode, as we are going further into the park, which is something we haven't done yet. We've expanded the park out sideways, but we haven't gone forwards past the HMS Victorious yet, and that is what we're doing today. Starting off with this, which is the focus of today's episode, a log flume. I believe one of you suggested that I build a log flume in the comments section. And so I thought, why not? I've needed something like this, and I'm sure you're all getting bored of watching me just place flat rides and cafes and stuff. So actually, for a change, I thought log flume might be nice. And that's what we're doing in today's episode, and it's going to be quite a fun one. As you'll see, I go through, I get all the theming on this done, and it's genuinely quite cool when it kind of gets to the end of it. So yeah, it is going to be a fun one, and you can see me here just getting the framework for this this log flume in, which is sunk into the ground. Now it's sunk into the ground because for me it's inspired by the log flume that used to sit at Flambard's, which, if you'll think back, all the way to episode I think it's episode 1 or 2 I spoke about it. This park is somewhat inspired by the old Flambard's park that now no longer exists, which is sad, but kind of getting this log flume in was a bout of nostalgia for me, and it's the reason why I've got it sunk into the ground, because the log flume at the little amusement park was in fact sunk into the ground, and this was so that it would you could have a viewing platform on the end that people could just look down into it from, and you can have a little bit off to the side that you can have as a bit of a splash zone, and we look at getting both of those around this fun little ride, which is brilliant. I am a big fan of this this log flume and what we do here, and you'll see me here getting trying to get some water in so I can have some water in this sort of trough down the end. In terms of theming for this, I won't tell you what the theme is quite yet, because that's the plan for further in, but it's sort of got a similar style that I've been wanting to go for this park, in the low budget, very much concrete and a couple of bits of theming, and it's slightly more than that, but I think what we end up with is ultimately really cool, and I really like it. And one of the parts of it was getting this kind of bit of water down at the end, which I was going to do with real water, but it didn't quite want to go. So you'll see in a bit that I come in and I actually put in our water using fake water. There's the water block scenery piece in the game that is so ever so handy, and yeah, I get to use it here to build this trough of water round the end, which is good. And you can see me here putting in the framework for our concrete slabs, our concrete base, as it were, which is quite fun. And yeah, you can see me now kind of boring this out so that I just have this concrete block, which I do really like. It looks quite good. Good's probably the wrong word. It looks it looks the way that I want it to, which isn't necessarily good. I think tacky is the word I'm looking for. It looks tacky, but I like it. And you can see me now getting in this water. And I think this is the thing that just starts to tie all of this together. Like this little trough area at the end, kind of getting the water in was the one thing that made it just look a lot better. And kind of started shaping the way for this log flume. And ultimately, this is the start of a new sort of miniature part of this series where we look at doing stuff in a particular theme. And I'm not quite going to tell you what that theme is yet, because that's coming later into the episode, but I can tell you that it is going to be a fun one. And you can see me here now putting in this walkway around the edge, which again, I really like kind of how close you can get to it. Obviously, I'll put fences in, that's what happens in the next episode, but kind of putting these fences in, I'm putting this path around the edge, ultimately gives this the vibe that I'm going for, which is again slightly tacky, but ultimately has a heart. And you can see that kind of throughout this, that is ultimately what I go for, and I think I succeed in getting that sort of feel. So yeah, it's all fun stuff, and we don't have any kind of real concrete or asphalt blocks in the game, so I've opted for this lime plaster. I did that around the base of the HMS Victorious a few episodes ago, and it worked well there. I think this is in a darker colour, but ultimately I think it works, and it does what it needs to do for, you know, looking like concrete. And yes, you can see me here struggling around with the controls of the game, which happens quite frequently, more often than, you know, you'd expect for someone who plays this game. But it's all fine because, as I say, I'm getting in these bits and pieces here, kind of making this into sort of a concrete trough that all of this theming is going to go into. And without telling you what theme this is quite yet, our next goal is to create a little bit of a tunnel or a cave for the boats to go through. That's something I wanted, you know, just a little terrible cave. You know, it doesn't need to look clean, it doesn't need to look nice, it just needs to look like a tunnel. And I know I'm using these tropical rocks here, but you know, in the real world they use, say, something much cheaper like fiberglass or something, so that they can get this ultimately in and looking good. And I like what I've got here in that it follows the lift hill up, which is quite good, and I do think it looks quite nice when we kind of get towards the end of it. But yeah, getting all of these rocks in with this tunnel was something that I quite liked. And it is now that I can finally reveal the theme as the Tub Thumper band comes in, that being the Planet Coaster Pirate Band. Yes, we are starting a new little pirate area of this park. Now, I know I wouldn't usually kind of go in with this project to go, oh, everything's going to be super themed, all of that. But ultimately, you know, I think that getting some theming in is ultimately what this park needs. And even if it's just something basic like, you know, pirates, fairy tale, spooky, all of that, getting those little bits of theming in are what makes this go from feeling, you know, slightly meh to actually looking like a real park. And I think you'll agree by the end of this episode that this is the right way to move forward. You know, we're getting a little bit more budget as we go along. We're getting more money in, so we can afford to spend a little more. Hence the theming for this ride. Now you can see me here putting this skull rock onto our tunnel, and I start by trying to get some lights in for the eyes, and I start off with these spotlights, and you know, they don't look great. I can tell you now for free, you know, it has the red effect of lighting it up, but it doesn't look like a pair of eyes. So I go through and I find these bits from the sorcery pack. They're the new lamppost pieces, and getting them in a nice red and just sticking them down there and lifting them up. Ultimately, you know, this looks a lot more like a set of red eyes, which I know is incredibly cheesy and tacky, but you're not telling me that this wouldn't be like this in a real park that is cheesy and tacky. And now you can see me here coming down to the trough, trying to think of something to go kind of around here and there. And kind of I start off with these jetty pieces, kind of making it a little bit of a walkway. You know, the real kind of kicker behind this is that there is no real rhyme, reason, or story behind the ride. It is just a collection of themed pieces, you know, with maybe a few unrelated scenes here and there to make it look really nice. And the real inspiration behind the theming really was the Legoland Windsor Log Flume, in terms of kind of the theming, because it's not overly themed. Like, it's got some nice pieces here and there, but it's not, you know, detailed, which is ultimately what I was going for here, in that, you know, a couple of wooden structures, couple of rocks, couple of small pieces here and there, bing bang boom, job is a good un. And you can see that as I start getting these small pieces in, the park just, well, the Log Flume just starts to take shape. And I did try something with these shipwreck pieces, but they're too big, and as much as I could scale them down, I had a better idea for them in the next video. So instead of having the shipwreck over there, I go for this shark, which, you know, brilliant photo opportunity for those off the ride taking photos, or those on the ride, you know. I turn it round here so that, again, it is a better photo opportunity off-ride and it looks better off-ride, but I think that's what, you know, works for this. And a lot of theming for this Log Flume is just putting rocks in and putting plants in. And yeah, so in terms of scenes, this doesn't really have scenes, but more kind of set pieces. And, you know, you've got this little pirate shack village here on these rocks with, you know, nets and all of that. And then you come down here, you go through the Skull Rock, and then you get to here, which is almost a bit of a mermaid lagoon, but there's only one mermaid and there's a mast in the middle. And obviously you start off with these few wooden buildings and structures, which is quite nice. But yeah, you can see me here kind of getting that in perfectly to add a little bit of a pool without having to, you know, build anything like the big trough at the end, because I wanted that to be very, you know, spectacular's the wrong word, but it's almost the right word, if that makes any sense. You know, it's not supposed to be big and impressive, but it's also supposed to have a little bit of a wow factor, and kind of putting masses of water over the rest of it would detract a little. So I think only having that kind of little pool there with the mermaid in just works the way I need it to. And you can see me here with the one bit that I think, you know, takes us a little over budget, but in a good way, is this sort of little hut that sits over the drop, which I'm not going to say stroke of genius, because again, this is inspired by the Log Flume at Legoland Windsor, which has this sort of hut over the big final drop. And kind of what I'm doing here is I'm making this sort of in this bamboo style at the top of this, and I know it looks very out of place now, but once I get everything looking nice and looking sharp in different colours, which I'm doing now, it starts to fit just a little bit more. And once I kind of get some legs and that on it, again, it looks even better. And I think this is what we're looking at doing now for the foreseeable of this video. So obviously I start off with those and go, no, that's lazy, that doesn't look good, let's actually get some pillars in. And again, I think this is the one suspension of disbelief for the budget in this ride, is this bamboo door. Because I just thought it adds a little bit, you know, you get to the top, you're about to go down the drop, but you don't know there's a drop there. I mean, in theory you know there's a drop there because you've watched it off-ride. But, you know, you can't see the drop coming up, then the doors open and you swing over the edge and you plunge into the splash zone down at the bottom. But yeah, it is, as I add more and more details to this hut, it just comes together, I think. And I know it's massively suspended at the moment, but adding in these pillars just makes it look a lot nicer as to, you know, what it ultimately does need to look like. And yeah, you can just see me here kind of copying these across to the corners and then kind of copying it across. And the big decision that I make is to get rid of the colour on all of these, just because, you know, as much as I like the yellow, green and red stripes in isolation, ultimately, you know, it's a bit too flashy, it's a bit too bright. So I will go back and I will change the colour on them at some point, and that I can tell you now. But yeah, no, it's quite fun getting this all together. And I think that's the biggest thing about this series, is I'm having fun. You know, I mean, we're already... This is the big 10th episode. You know, when I started this, I didn't necessarily think I'd make it this far. I'd get, you know, 3 episodes in and give up. But I'm still going, and, you know, yous in the community are keeping me going, as it were. So thank you for kind of being a little bit of a fan base and kind of keep tuning into my little adventures here. And the other thing that I didn't, you know, that I thought would be a bigger problem than it is burnout. Because obviously I'm working a lot on these videos and it's a lot in-game. And as much as I, you know, only spend sort of at max 2 hours recording in one session, it is still a lot. But kind of I'm always finding something new to do, and I think that's ultimately why, you know, I decided, okay, we'll actually start a new kind of themed area in this in this park, is ultimately because, you know, it keeps me from sort of getting burnt out doing one thing. And you know, kind of it's why I like doing the little details in things, but then I kind of rush around, I do this, I do that, I do everything every which way, and I know it can be a little frustrating to watch, but ultimately it's the way that I like doing things, and it keeps me from kind of getting bored with doing one thing in the park. So we're getting some foliage out on the trough now, which is quite fun, all of these little palm trees, and I think this is ultimately what starts to tie the ride together, you know. As much as I've got these pieces here and there, doing these little bits throughout the ride, I think it's just getting some green in, just some greenery onto the onto the ride itself that makes it look nice. And here I'm starting a bit of a queue line, which is fun. I always like building queues in this game now that we've got the ability to do proper kind of switchback queues and kind of make them go back and forth. And yeah, it's just fun, and I always like kind of theming up a queue, putting my own twist on, you know, the classic fences on them and stuff. And yeah, it's just fun, and I really like what I end up with for this queue. And as much as I'm, you know, struggling with where to put the layout for now, it's all because I've done it in a certain way that kind of it just feels a little off, but getting it in there like that just feels nice, and I like ultimately what we end up with. But yeah, you can see me here getting in the path around this, and it's just finishing off kind of these little bits here and there. And we now move on to my favourite bit of any ride. That's right, the station. And I I love a good station building, and you'll notice a lot with this that I do keep the same sort of batten wood structure around the kind of as the shell, as it were. You know, I've done it with the with our barn stormer, but actually here you'll see that I'm putting these in, but ultimately I will kind of add little details around the edge that make it different, that make it feel, you know, new and exciting. And ultimately in this case it's more of these bamboo pieces that tie it back in with that hut up at the top. And yeah, it's just really kind of nice to get in and watch myself do all of this. It is fun. You know, I'll look at myself and I go, what are you doing? And then I'll look at it and I'll go, oh yeah, I know what my thought process was. I'm getting there, slowly but surely. And I'm making something that I am ultimately quite proud of. And I know it doesn't quite look complete in this episode, but I promise you once we get fences in and once we sort of get stuff in the next episode, it will start looking really nice. And yeah, that's the benefit that I have, is that, you know, I record these episodes 2 at a time usually. I'll do a block of 2. You know, that'll be an hour for one video, an hour for another video, and then I'll kind of come out and I'll edit them. And I have the foresight for what I've done between the episodes and in the next episode, so I can't spoil much, but you do have a very nice episode coming up in the next one. And you can see me here, as I said, putting this bamboo trim around the edge, and it starts by looking a little weird, I will admit, but please, I say hear me out on this, because this trim ultimately really works and just makes this building feel different to the others, you know, and it just looks very nice once I'm done with it, and I know I finish it in the next episode. So you're going to have to trust me, or you're going to have to watch the next episode to find out, which a little bit of self-promotion there. And yeah, it is all fun stuff here. You know, we've made a log flume, and I've basically completed an entire ride in one episode. Like, I will put my hands down and say, you know, this doesn't happen often, but when it does happen, it is fun. And you know, I'm usually like someone who will spend 3 episodes fully getting something nice, or spend time off camera making it look good. But I think what I've done here works, and the fact that I've been able to concisely sit down to, I say an episode, technically an episode and a half if you count all the fences and stuff around the outside. So yeah, ultimately, like, I'm proud of this, and this might be the thing that I'm proudest of in this park so far. As much as I like the Barnstormer, this is just nice. See you in real time. Yes, welcome back to Real Time. I hope you have enjoyed this episode. As I say, today we have worked on this, our new little log flume, which we don't have a name for yet, but we will do by the time the next episode rolls around. And I do really like the way that this looks, kind of from the station, which we will do a bit more work on alongside the queue line, and just the surrounding area, to kind of this first little area here with all these little shacks. Of course, this skull rock, this little back area here with the mermaid, the shack at the top, and obviously the plunge down into the trough of water. Now, if you have enjoyed this episode, then please feel free to give me a like, give me a comment, and possibly even a subscribe if I am lucky. And I will see you in the next episode. Now, without further ado, roll that outro.